Blog Talk Radio. Glen Laman is a graduate of the University of Management and Technology with a doctorate in business administration. He also is a certified project manager and has extensive career in the corporate American as an information technology and business project manager. He has worked for a major corporations such as Coca-Cola Company, J.C. Penney, and AT&T. He first encountered the entrepreneurial world as a young boy when his father operated a grocery store and later Claudette's ice cream parlor. Do you guys remember that one? It was a restaurant in Kingston, Jamaica, capital. As a teenager, he worked in his brother's wholesale store on the weekends and vacation. Despite an exciting career in the corporate world, he has responded to the call of entrepreneurship and opened a restaurant in a shopping mall. Later, a business which imported frozen coconut water, juices, and other products from Jamaica for distribution in the U.S. As usual, my co-host, Chris Daly, he will be conducting the interview, so take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Denise, and welcome, Dr. Lamont. It's good to have you on tonight.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. First, we'd like to kind of explore your Jamaican roots. Please share with us the family values that power this very prosperous life journey of yours.
Well, I grew up in the parish of St. Anne, which is known as the Garden Parish, and so I spent basically my formative years in the quiet, peaceful district called Coltart Grove. So it's a rural area of Jamaica. And I remember we had chickens and goats and pigs in our yard. So we were close to nature. Let's put it that way.
I know it.
So there's a saying in Jamaica, that, at least in the countryside, people's navel strings are planted under some tree. And I'm told that mine was planted under a breadfruit tree on my grandmother's property in St. Anne. So, but I think that early exposure to country life has sort of been an important aspect of my personality because I'm very conscious of the overall environment and how nature affects things. But essentially, what I took away from the country life is that where there's a will, there is a way, because life was pretty rough in those days, and but my grandmother always said, where there's a will, there is a way, and so I've always remembered that throughout my journey through life, and that has kept me in good stead, I think.
That's wonderful. But you then a place of Jamaica and you migrated to the United States. What spurred that migration journey?
Right. So what happened to me is I won a free place to high school in Kingston, Jamaica's capital, and so I was fortunate to get a high school education free of cost. By the way, in those days, high school education was not free for most people. You had to pay, but they did offer a limited number of free places or scholarships, so to speak. So I was fortunate enough to get one of those. But unfortunately, my father died when I was about 15, and that threw everything in disarray. I was able to hang in there and finish, but after I graduated, I went to work for a bauxite mining company. And after about a year, I realized that, I needed to do something else. So I started, a friend of mine told me that, in America, you could work and go to school. And so that was a very attractive idea to me. And so I pursued that, and I was able to get in touch with an uncle that I had in New York, and he agreed to help me to make the move. And so I ended up in New York And one of the first things I did was enroll in college, without knowing how I was going to pay for it, by the way. But again, where there's a will, there's a way, and it worked out.
Well, you certainly did well. You went on to a stellar career in corporate America. What were some of the key takeaways from your American corporate life experience?
Well, the first corporate job I had was at J.C. Penney in New York City. And at the time, J.C. Penney had won awards for being one of the best managed companies in the U.S. And so I think just being a part of that corporate structure, you learned the basically what good management entailed, and also to be a professional, essentially. And later on, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I was able to get a job with Coca-Cola, where I worked for some 20 years. And I think the main thing at Coca-Cola was I learned to work with some very, very smart people. And also, I was afforded the opportunity to travel internationally. And so, because of that job, I was able to go to Europe, to Africa, the Far East, Asia, South America, Central America, and so on. So that was really, I think, an aspect of my job that helped to round out my education, allowed me to work with different cultures and learn about different people. So a very important aspect, I think.
And you also worked with AT&T?
Yes. After leaving Coke, I had to work with AT&T's, at the time it was Bell South Mobility, the cell company division. I was on a contract. I was on a contract with them for about 3 years. So also exposed to, the technology with cell phone systems and so on. So that was really interesting and very high, powerful, and fast-moving environment, which I learned a lot, too, about technology there.
If that wasn't enough for you, you decided to take on a different journey. And so you decided to pursue a PhD.
Right.
And also the title of your PhD is Study of Jamaican Entrepreneurship. Tell us a little how you came to that kind of determination.
Well, as a boy, my father, was an entrepreneur. He had operated a grocery store and, as Janice mentioned, a restaurant in Kingston. And then my brother also. My brothers also were entrepreneurs. So I was fascinated by people who did that kind of thing. And while I lived in Kingston, I knew this woman who owned a small restaurant on Wildman Street in Kingston, in downtown Kingston. But she was an illiterate woman. She could not read or write. But she ran a terrific restaurant with some of the best tasting and best smelling food around. And eventually she expanded and opened a second restaurant several blocks away, and that also did very well. So that, as a boy, I was fascinated by that because, I was trying to get an education and sacrifices were being made in that regard. And here was this woman who was doing really well, and she couldn't read, and she couldn't write.
Okay.
So I wanted to find out, what is it about people who are entrepreneurs that they were able to do things like that, and with all the obstacles and impediments, they somehow found a way and found opportunities in which they could excel.
Well, you've captured it well in this lovely book, Jamaican Entrepreneurship, a review of the characteristics, traits, ideas underlying success of some of the island's most accomplished entrepreneurs. I call it the Fabulous 15, and it covers a diversity of journeys. But are there some common traits you're able to notice from the folks that you studied?
Yes, there are several traits that I think many of these entrepreneurs had in common. The one that I like to focus on is what I call what is known as opportunity recognition. Because, Jamaica is a small island developing state. And as such, it has many problems for people who are in business. It's a small economy. It's goods cost more because you have to import everything. Usually you have some, bad weather, hurricanes and the like. And then you have to contend with government issues. And, of course, the economy. You don't have the economies of scale you have in a big market like, say, the United States or even China. So
right.
The fact that people can still find an opportunity, is really remarkable. And so I think that's a key thing, that in the midst of all the issues and problems, these Jamaicans were able to see the opportunity and then seize on that opportunity. So, where many other people see problems, an entrepreneur is able to see an opportunity or a business idea in that mix.
What are the biggest obstacles, actually, or hindrances you did mention? Within the Jamaican economy, the government is the dominant player in the economy. How do you see it helping or hindering the entrepreneurs that you did study?
Right. So it's well known that Jamaica is a very difficult place to start and do business. In fact, in my book I mentioned one frustrated young woman who wrote a book on how to navigate the maze of permits and approvals that you need to start a business. This is a woman who had lived in the U.S. for a while, and then she went back to Jamaica, decided to start a business, and was really frustrated with all the maneuverings that she had to go through, and so she wrote this book. But the World Bank, I think, in 2014 had ranked Jamaica as 94th out of 109 countries in terms of ease of doing business. So obviously, based on that, they had some work to do. The good news, though, is that Jamaica is improving and made a big jump in the last year, I think. They moved up the rank to number 58. So this is a very positive development for the island. They've made the requirements for starting a business more efficient, and they've reduced the cost of getting electricity connected significantly. And they've started a credit bureau and passed a few laws to broaden the group of assets that can be used as collateral for people who are seeking a loan. So with that, Jamaica now has the best ranking in the Caribbean. So it's getting better. I don't think anybody would tell you that it's a piece of cake, but I think they're moving in the right direction. So that's a good thing.
Well, that's good to hear. Usually I look at entrepreneurs as heroes, and they usually have challenges to overcome. You mentioned before this lady who could not read, but she actually started businesses and actually franchised it. Was there a story that you ran across in your research that's so inspirational that could even spark some young person or older person who may be listening to this interview?
Right. One of my favorite people in the book is Lois Sherwood. And Lois, from a very early age, was a very determined young woman. She actually didn't want to be an entrepreneur. Her first love is really art, and she is, in her own right, a distinguished artist in Jamaica and has done many important pieces that are on display all over the Caribbean. But she always had the knack for getting what she wanted. I think at an early age she wanted to study art. Her father would hear none of it because he says, how do you know any artists who can pay rent?
Okay.
But she conspired with her mother and enrolled in art school in Haiti, and only told her father when she had already left the island. So this showed you from an early age how determined she was to achieve whatever she set her mind to do. So later on in life, she got married and started to keep house and so on, and realized that her husband was having some issues on his job, and she told him to quit. And he said, "Are you crazy? What would we do?" She said, "We'll start a business." And then she went on to explain to him that she had been saving some of the grocery money, and had saved up some money, and actually was buying furniture from, at that time, Jamaica, a newly independent country. Expats were leaving, going back to England, And so they were selling their furniture cheaply. So she was buying up these furniture and putting them away, and then here comes this opportunity to open a business now with her husband where they would sell antiques. And even beyond that, what she did was she got local craftsmen to copy the antiques, which she would then sell as period reproductions. So she started a business doing that. But her real power came when she heard about the Burger King franchise expanding into the Caribbean, and decided that they would apply. Of course, they were rejected, but she, being persistent, demanded an audience with the local company that represented Burger King, and then she explained to them why they should give her the franchise, and then they did. They reconsidered and gave it to them. And throughout her story, if you read her stories in my book, you could see that she could see things that others could not see. She was very determined. She was able to borrow money at a time when many women were not able to get a loan from the bank. I think she was one of the first women to get a loan from her particular bank in Jamaica at the time. So her determination, her tenacity, her willingness to step out and go for what she wanted was really very inspiring, a very inspiring story.
That's wonderful. There's some young person out there that I hope that will really spur their imagination, because it's going to take a vision beyond just the obvious to see the value. Are there any other hopes you have? It's Christmas time, and this is, if you'd like to give a gift that's going to leave a legacy, this is the kind of gift that folks should be given. What are some of the hopes that you hope to deliver to the readers of this book who are inspiring entrepreneurs?
Well, the book, Jamaican Entrepreneurship, lays out what I call a roadmap for entrepreneurial success. It analyzes, what these 15 people have done and how they achieved success and what were the factors that were critical to their success. I think it's instructive to both parents and young people alike. For example, I believe that parents should realize that they can actually encourage entrepreneurship in their children. Let them do stuff, give them responsibility at a very early age. Michael Leachin, probably the richest Jamaican, was allowed to operate his parents' shop, when he was only, I think, age 12, and he was able, he was allowed to close up at night, in the evenings. So give them responsibility. Let them think outside the box. Allow them to make mistakes. I think a lot of times we're so intent on making sure that they're obedient and they do everything perfectly. We don't let them flourish and be creative, which is what children are naturally creative. For example, Steve Jobs, his parents were smart enough to allow him, to create space in their garage, so he could tinker with equipment, electronics, whatever. And Richard Branson, of Virgin Airlines and Virgin fame, his mother allowed him to quit school early. I mean, how many people would do that? So parents can play a big role, I think. But also young people, when they read these stories, they can be inspired when they realize that many of these Jamaicans came from very poor backgrounds, people who had no electricity, no running water at home, but they were able to set goals and they pursued them with tenacity and, they were able to overcome. Entrepreneurship is a great equalizer. I think Damon John, one of the sharks in the Shark Tank, says that often. It's the opportunities are out there. So we just have to open our eyes and learn to spot them. And as one of the famous Jamaican reggae singers says, you can get it if you really want, but you must try, and try. You will succeed at last. So that's my message to young people, to the next generation of Jamaican entrepreneurs.
I want you to also speak to the government, because government policies can create hurdles for entrepreneurs. What recommendations have you deducted from your findings?
Well, according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, Jamaica Jamaica is one of the most entrepreneurial countries, and they view entrepreneurship very highly, and it's recognized and applauded in society. But entrepreneurial risk-taking, creativity, and innovation are not really well supported in Jamaica. For example, if you have a business and it fails, people, look down on you. Oh, this guy lost all that money. So we have to change some things. One of the GEM surveys showed that coping with government bureaucracy, the regulations and the licensing requirements, was something that made it difficult for young firms. So we need to enact new laws that can reduce the absolute risk to persons who are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs have to take risks, and they will fail. And the problem, though, failure, should not be the end, because sometimes, it's on the second or third attempt that you find that sweet spot. So we can improve the social safety net for people who are engaged in business, and also there should be some kind of bankruptcy protection for people who lose businesses. We had a very big crisis a few years ago when there was a banking crisis, and people who owed, say, $1 million over time ended up owing, $100 million, because there were no limits, and it became a really horrible situation for the business community.
How about the educational policies? Are there any kind of parts of the curriculum in the schools that actually foster entrepreneurism? Right.
When I was growing up, there was nothing along that line. In fact, we often joke that, in 50 years ago, the only thing we knew that you could become was a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And that was encouraged. Right? If you didn't see that you could do one of those three, you felt you were doomed. So that, of course, I think has changed a lot. But still, I think that the educational system, we need to realize that people are how do we say it now? People can actually use the other side of the brain. So most of the education is directed or supports people who are left brain. And in my book, I also mentioned that studies have found that many entrepreneurs are right brain thinkers. They think outside the box. They don't think in the typical fashion or the typical sequence that people who do well in school think. But you need those people. A lot of people that I know who are entrepreneurs were not very good at school. They found it very difficult, and I think that's borne out in my book as well, that several of those entrepreneurs said they didn't like school, they couldn't really deal with it, and some left school very early. So that has to change. I think the system has to recognize that there is more than one way to learn, and there are different types of learning, different types of aptitudes, and we have to allow for the different variances. And there's no one mold that leads to success. And somehow that has to be adopted. I think there's a step in the right direction, because I think they're introducing a course in entrepreneurship at some schools. Although my own preference is not so much for teaching entrepreneurship, but allowing the natural flow of how allowing people's creativity and innovation to come to the forefront.
That's wonderful. Well, I want you to look into a crystal ball. It's like the ghost of Christmas future. And to envision Jamaica with or without entrepreneurial spirit that's fostered, given that we live in a global economy where it's no longer what you can make that matters, but your ideas and being able to leverage knowledge. Speak to that if you could.
Well, as I said before, the Jamaicans are naturally entrepreneurial, probably because of their environment. Jobs are hard to get, so people must try something to earn a living. And so they're what we call necessity entrepreneurs. They start a business out of necessity, because there's no way they would get a job. So without that, Jamaica would really be in serious trouble. So that's not a good picture. So for the future, though, I think we need to have entrepreneurs who are what we call opportunity entrepreneurs. So the existing necessity entrepreneurs need to transition and become opportunistic entrepreneurs. So these are the entrepreneurs who will take the small business, maybe the one shop, and go to 2 and 3 and 4, and then create wealth. So this is what we would like to see, where we make that transition. So the vision then for Jamaica is that we would have a lot of these opportunistic type of entrepreneurs, which would radically transform the country as we know it.
I like that dream. I like that vision. Great. Dr. Laman, thank you so much for doing this research and putting it in a form that people can easily access. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us tonight?
I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning, is that where there is a will, there is a way. I remember when I started college, I didn't know how I would pay. I only had money for the for half the first semester's tuition. Luckily, I found a school that allowed me to pay in installments. So you were able to pay half, and then you could make 2 other payments. And so that's what I did. I was really nervous about it, but after the first semester, different things happened. The school gave me a partial scholarship and so on, and I got a job and so on. So the key is to keep pursuing your dream, is to realize that if you really wanted to do something, there will be a way. And it took me, I did not get my doctorate until I was 60. So it took me all that time, because there are many twists and turns in life, but I never lost sight. I just figured that somehow I would get back to it, and I finally done that. So I think that should give hope that there is a way if you have a will.
So you just didn't study. You're a personal testimony to what it is to practice and put in action these thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more about Jamaican Diaspora, visit JamaicanDiaspora.com. To learn more about Chris Taylor, visit digitaltogrow.com. To order Dr. Glen Laman's book, the Jamaican Entrepreneurship, it's called the Jamaican Entrepreneur by Dr. Glen Laman. You can visit GlenLaman.com. That's GlenLaman.com. Thank you, Glen, Dr. Laman. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. Bye now.
Thank you, Janice. It was my pleasure.